Sagittarius, the complete rebirth. Ready to receive the life meant for you. The complete rebirth begins now. Sagittarius, what if I told you this isn't another chapter? What if this is the book you were always meant to begin? You've survived. You've surrendered. You've healed in silence and risen in storms. You've let go of people who felt like home and stories that shaped you but no longer served you. And now you stand not at a crossroads, but at a clear golden doorway. This isn't a test. It's an invitation. You're not here to fight for your worth anymore. You're here to finally receive what has always been yours. This moment is different. You can feel it in your breath, your bones, your quiet thoughts at midnight. Life no longer asks you to chase, prove, or perform. It's asking you to arrive. To step into a version of yourself that no longer seeks permission but understands alignment. This is not about doing more. It's about becoming more of who you truly are, unfiltered, whole, and ready. And maybe a part of you still hesitates, still wonders if joy this pure is meant for you. Let me remind you, dear Sagittarius, the life you're about to receive isn't random. It's been waiting for your readiness. Not perfect readiness. Energetic readiness. This is the complete rebirth. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that clicks. That hums softly. You're home now. If you feel this deep in your chest, if some quiet part of you knows this is your season of becoming, not slowly, not almost, but fully, then stay with me. I'm Sophia, your astrologer and soul guide here at Zodiac Wisdom. And this is where stars meet soul and healing finds language. Like this video if your heart whispered yes. Share it with someone awakening alongside you, and subscribe to stay close as we walk through this sacred rebirth, one truth at a time. You are not rebuilding. You are becoming. And that changes everything. Gate 1, releasing the final weights. Sagittarius, you've let go of so much already. People who no longer see you. Paths that led to dead ends. Roles you played so well they nearly became your identity. And yet, here at the edge of your rebirth, you feel the presence of something subtle still clinging to you. Something weightless in form but heavy in feeling. These aren't physical burdens anymore. They're the final invisible threads. The echo of old judgments, the guilt that doesn't belong to you. The inherited beliefs about what you should be. And the quiet, unspoken rules you learn to follow in order to be loved. This is the moment to lay them down. Not with rage. Not with resistance. But with reverence. Because those old weights once kept you safe. They were the armor you forged to survive rooms that couldn't hold your light. Dynamics that punished your truth. Relationships that mistook your freedom for threat. But now the war is over. And the armor is rusting. You are no longer in danger, you're in becoming. And you cannot rise if you're still wrapped in stories that say you must shrink. One of my Sagittarius clients, Alara, once said to me with tears in her eyes, I didn't realize how many parts of me were still shaped by fear I thought I'd outgrown. She had already done the work, therapy, rituals, journaling, retreats, but she hadn't yet recognized that even her idea of healing had become a kind of performance. She was still trying to deserve peace, still holding her breath, afraid that if she finally felt free, she might be punished for it. That's what the last layer often looks like. It's quiet. It hides inside what we think is growth. It whispers, be careful how bright you become. But Sagittarius, this is the part where you release even the need to protect yourself from your own power. This is the part where you understand that the people who projected their limits onto you were never authorities of your path. They were reflections of your old vibration. Necessary once, no longer aligned now. You're not being cruel by letting go of their voices. You're being honest. And in that honesty you rise. Imagine for a moment a hot air balloon, magnificent and ready. You fueled it with healing, patched every wound, filled it with dreams. It is ready to soar. But around its basket hang the final bags of sand, small, overlooked, left there out of habit. They are the doubts you inherited, the apologies you kept rehearsing, the roles you still play in conversations where your silence feels easier than your truth. These weights will not release themselves. You must unfasten them with intention. You must name them, thank them, and cut them loose. Because the air is calling you now. There's a version of you that already exists above the clouds. A you who wakes up rested instead of responsible. A you who doesn't scan the room before speaking. A you who doesn't confuse shrinking with safety. That version is not waiting for you to become better. She's waiting for you to become lighter. And that lightness only arrives when you stop trying to carry every version of yourself that was designed to be temporary. You are not obligated to keep any belief, pattern, or attachment that no longer fits your frequency. You are allowed to change even when no one else understands why. You are allowed to outgrow what once felt like home. You are allowed to choose joy without needing pain to justify it. These permissions are not external, they are yours to give. And I promise you this. Once you drop the final weights, the lift will be undeniable. You will feel it in your body. A loosening in your chest, a breath that goes deeper, a smile that comes not from something new happening, but from something old leaving. This is how you know you're rising. Not because life gets louder, but because your soul grows still and full. You are not just ready to rise. You are ready to rise unchained. That is what this moment asks of you. Not effort, not explanation, just release. And once you do, once you truly let go, what's meant for you will no longer feel far. It will feel familiar. It will feel inevitable, because it was never late. It was just waiting for you to stop carrying what you no longer needed. Gate 2 from survival to true living. There comes a point, Sagittarius, when the heart grows tired, not from failure, but from the exhausting rhythm of always having to be okay. You've worn resilience like a badge of honor, a necessary shield in a world that didn't always know how to hold your fire. For years, you've carried yourself through the ache of disappointment, through the dull weight of days that blurred together in a quiet, persistent ache. You've survived, and that matters. But now something deeper is stirring. You're realizing that surviving isn't the same as living. You've known how to push through, how to compartmentalize your grief, rationalize your longings, make peace with just enough. But lately, the things that once sustained you feel paper thin. The coping mechanisms, the routines, even the ambitions. You see them now for what they are. Beautiful scaffolding that once held you upright, but no longer help you rise. And so here you are, sensing that you've outgrown survival and longing, aching for something more, to feel alive, not just functional. True living doesn't roar in. It whispers. It shows up in unexpected moments. Those seconds where your body relaxes without asking permission, where you laugh and realize you didn't rehearse it, where you sit in the sunlight and don't feel guilty for resting. These moments are clues, Sagittarius. Signs that your soul is ready to step into a different kind of existence. But this shift doesn't happen overnight. It requires honesty, and often grief. One of my Sagittarius clients, Mila, once came to me in tears, not because of something tragic, but because of something far more tender. "I don't know what I want," she said, voice breaking. "I've been surviving so long, I think I forgot how to want at all." Mila had grown up in a family where she was the dependable one, the achiever, the fixer, the light in the storm. And even into adulthood, she carried that role like a second skin. She checked all the boxes: a stable job, a well-kept home, people who relied on her. But inside she was numb. She didn't feel joy, only relief when things didn't fall apart. Her life wasn't a mess. It was managed, and that was the problem. What Mila didn't know was that this numbness wasn't failure. It was her soul's quiet protest. It was her body asking for softness, for slowness, for life beyond maintenance. So we began small. I asked her what made her curious, not productive, not impressive, just curious. First she struggled, but slowly a list emerged. Painting, herbal tea rituals, learning Italian, watching the sky. Things with no outcome attached. Things that didn't need to be useful to be worthy. And as Mila gave herself permission to explore these quiet joys, something began to shift. She no longer needed to escape her life through overwork or endless distraction. She began to live inside her days. She noticed how sunlight hit the kitchen floor in the morning. She danced barefoot in her apartment with no one watching. She laughed more. Freely, awkwardly, beautifully. The survival shell began to crack, not with force but with grace. That's the truth of this gateway, Sagittarius. You don't break out of survival. You dissolve it, layer by layer, breath by breath, through the brave decision to stop performing worthiness and start embodying aliveness. This isn't easy. Sometimes the body clings to old adrenaline. It doesn't know yet how to relax into peace. You may feel strange when things go well, like you're waiting for the catch. That's normal. When you've lived in hypervigilance, calm can feel suspicious. Joy can feel dangerous. But the more you stay, the more you let yourself be held by life instead of holding it all together, the more your nervous system remembers, it's safe now. And slowly, your reality begins to mirror that safety. You start choosing differently. Not because you're afraid, but because you're aligned. You stop entertaining connections that drain you. You lose interest in goals that were born from fear. You begin to crave gentler mornings, deeper conversations, quieter nights. Not because you've become small, but because your soul no longer confuses chaos with passion. Living is not about doing more. It's about being more present to what already exists. It's sipping your tea with both hands. It's lying in bed and letting yourself rest fully, without mentally calculating what you need to do tomorrow. It's making a meal just because it's beautiful. It's listening to music and letting it break you open. Not because you're sad, but because you're alive. This new way of being is not a luxury. It is a necessity. Because no amount of striving will substitute for presence. No amount of achievement will replace the feeling of being rooted in your body, connected to your breath, aware of your joy. Another Sagittarius, Daniel, shared something that stayed with me. He said, "The first time I realized I was really living was when I stopped needing to earn rest. I was walking through a garden one morning and I just stopped. I let the sun warm my face. And for once, I didn't tell myself I had to get back to it. I stayed. And I felt like I belonged to the moment." That's what living is, Sagittarius. Not escaping, not proving, but belonging to your breath, your body, your right to be here exactly as you are. So if you feel strange lately, disoriented, sensitive, slower, it doesn't mean something's wrong. It means you're shedding survival. It means your system is recalibrating. You are no longer running on fear. You're learning to rest and trust. You are letting the joy in, not as a guest but as your default setting. And I promise you, once this shift takes hold, once you taste the difference between surviving and living, you'll never want to go back. Not because you're rejecting your past, but because you finally understand you deserve to be more than just okay. You deserve to feel it all, to be met in your gentleness, to create without pressure, to be loved without conditions, to wake up and feel the miracle of an ordinary morning. Not because something spectacular happened, but because you are finally here to witness it. Gain through the courage to receive. You've given so much of yourself, Sagittarius, freely, generously, often without being asked. You've been the light in someone else's darkness, the grounding voice in another's chaos, the shoulder, the guide, the space holder. You've shown up for others in ways that were beautiful, and at times invisible. And while the world is better because of your giving, there is something vital you're now being asked to learn. How to receive. This may sound simple, but for you it isn't. Because for most of your life, giving has felt safer than receiving. Giving gave you a sense of purpose. It made you feel needed. It shielded you from vulnerability. To give was to control the direction of energy. To receive, however, has always asked more of you. More surrender, more trust, more softness. But you're ready now. Receiving is not passive. It's one of the most courageous acts a soul can learn. To open your palms and say, "Yes, I am worthy of this." Without flinching, without deflecting, without shrinking. This is the real work. Especially when you've been conditioned to believe that love must be earned, that support must be paid back, that happiness must be justified. Especially when your instincts still whisper, "Don't take too much. Don't need too much. Don't be too much." Let me tell you about someone who reminds me deeply of you. Her name is Anya, a Sagittarius healer I worked with a few years ago. For a long time, Anya had convinced herself she was content. Her days were full of clients, her inbox full of thank yous, and her calendar full of service. But inside she was starving. Starving for tenderness, for someone to care for her, for a softness that didn't come with strings. She would cry quietly at night, not from sadness, but from a bone-deep exhaustion that no sleep could fix. When I asked her what she longed for most, she said, "To let someone hold me without feeling like I owe them something in return." That moment was the beginning of her shift. Because the wound she was carrying wasn't just about burnout, it was about value. Somewhere along the way, she had internalized the belief that her worth came from how much she gave. And receiving, that was dangerous. It made her feel exposed, dependent, even guilty. Together we began small. I asked her to practice receiving compliments without deflecting them. When someone said, "You look beautiful today," instead of replying, "It's just the lighting," she practiced saying. "Thank you." She began accepting help when it was offered. Letting a friend bring her dinner, letting someone open a door, letting herself be cared for without apology. And slowly a miracle happened. She began to feel fuller. Not because she was doing more, but because she was allowing life to meet her halfway. She started to realize that giving and receiving were not separate lanes. They were two currents in the same river. And as she opened herself to both, her joy stopped leaking. Her body softened. Her days felt less like sacrifice and more like partnership with the universe. This is what awaits you now, Sagittarius. You are not being asked to give less. You're being asked to balance the scales. The universe cannot pour into you if you refuse to become a vessel. You cannot bloom if you keep holding an umbrella over your head every time love tries to rain down. Receiving doesn't make you selfish. It makes you whole. You are allowed to receive kindness without owing anything. You are allowed to receive money without guilt. You are allowed to receive love that doesn't demand you shrink or perform. You are allowed to be supported, seen, celebrated. Not because you've earned it, but because you exist. And your existence is enough. I want you to reflect for a moment. When was the last time you let someone see you fully, tears, joy, complexity, and didn't apologize for it? When was the last time you let yourself accept without instinctively reaching to give back? What would it feel like truly to let life love you back? This is the frequency of your rebirth receptivity. Not the kind that waits for permission, but the kind that remembers you've already been chosen. Because the life that's meant for you, it's not waiting for you to become someone else. It's waiting for you to let it in. And letting it in might look like resting instead of hustling. Saying yes to help. Taking up space in conversations. Believing the praise. Choosing the relationship that feels like ease. Saying no to what drains you. Not because you're heartless, but because you're finally full. You are not selfish for prioritizing your energy. You are not arrogant for believing you are deserving. You are not fragile for asking to be loved gently. You are not less spiritual for wanting beauty, abundance, sweetness. These things don't make you weak. They make you alive. Sagittarius, your hands have held the weight of others long enough. Now they are open. Not empty but ready. Ready to receive what has been circling you for years. Ready to welcome the life that doesn't require a fight. Ready to soften into the current instead of always swimming upstream. Ready to trust that being poured into does not mean you failed. It means you finally arrived. Because you were never meant to pour from an empty cup. And now, for the first time in a long time, that cup is being filled. Gate 4, living at a new frequency. There's a moment, Sagittarius, when you realize you no longer resonate with what once excited you. The goals that once kept you up at night now feel distant, hollow. The people who once felt like gravity begin to drift quietly out of your orbit. The patterns you used to cling to now feel tight, like clothes you've outgrown. And at first it's confusing, lonely even. You wonder if you've lost your fire. But the truth is gentler and far more sacred. Your frequency has shifted. And you're not fading, you're ascending. Living at a new frequency doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't always involve quitting jobs or leaving relationships or moving cities. Sometimes it's quieter than that. It's saying no to a conversation that once hooked you. It's walking away from proving yourself. It's pausing before reacting. It's choosing rest even when your old identity screams. You're falling behind. It's the deep-rooted knowing. You don't need to hustle to be worthy anymore. This shift isn't about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you to edit yourself. You're not trying to improve. You're returning. And yet, not everyone will understand. There will be people who miss the old version of you, the one who overextended, who said yes too quickly, who made herself small to keep the peace. They'll say you've changed. They might say it like it's a bad thing. But don't flinch. Change is not betrayal. It's a declaration. I am finally choosing to match the life I came here to live. You're no longer here to prove you're good enough. You're here to embody the truth that you always were. And this embodiment is magnetic. Because when you start vibrating at your true frequency, when you live in alignment with your values, your energy, your rhythm, life begins to organize itself around that. You attract differently. You speak differently. You move through the world with a clarity that doesn't need volume. The right people feel it. The right opportunities align. Not because you're forcing them, but because you're finally a match for what you've been asking for. Let me tell you about Jonah, another Sagittarius client who, for years, chased one spiritual practice after another. He traveled to temples in India, meditated in silence for weeks, read every book he could find, but still he felt like something was missing. He told me, "I've done everything they say brings peace, but I still feel like I'm searching." I asked him one question. "Are you practicing presence or chasing enlightenment like another achievement?" He was silent. That silence turned into a turning point. Jonah began shifting his energy, not towards doing more, but toward being more honest. He started showing up to life as he was, not who he thought he should be. He stopped trying to impress his spiritual community, and instead started enjoying the quiet simplicity of walking his dog every morning, making slow breakfasts, having real conversations with people who grounded him. And in those moments, the frequency of his life changed, not because he ascended, but because he landed. Sagittarius, you are meant to live landed, anchored, not in sameness but in truth. You don't need to constantly upgrade, expand, manifest. Sometimes the most radical act is to stay fully, honestly, unapologetically in the now. This new frequency feels like peace, but it might look like solitude. Feels like joy, but it might look like walking away from what once entertained you. Feels like clarity, but it might look like losing people who never truly saw you. Feels like love, but it might look like starting over. And all of that is okay, because you're no longer trading your authenticity for approval. You're no longer bending to be understood. You are standing, glowing, radiating from within, and allowing only what aligns with your truth to stay. Not as a defense, but as an invitation. You're not closing the door. You're simply vibrating at a frequency that no longer allows what drains you to enter. And what enters now? It's different. It's slower but more rooted. It's quieter but more nourishing. The people who arrive in your life now don't want to fix you. They want to witness you. The opportunities that show up now don't demand you sacrifice your peace. They expand your presence. The version of you that lives now doesn't need applause. She needs alignment. And she finally has it. Living at a new frequency means understanding that nothing is owed, and nothing needs to be chased. What is meant for you will feel peaceful, not performative. It will feel steady, not chaotic. It will feel like home, not because it makes you feel small and safe, but because it invites your fullness to rise without question. So yes, Sagittarius, you have changed. Not because you're lost, but because you're finally found. You've dropped the old identities. You've unplugged from the noise. You've softened into your essence. And that essence is now calling in a new world. Let it come. Let it match you. Let it feel like the deep exhale you didn't know you were holding. Because when you start living at your true frequency, life doesn't just shift, it sings. Conclusion: you are the miracle now. Sagittarius, after everything, after the letting go, the grieving, the rediscovering, the awakening, you are finally standing where your soul always intended you to arrive. Not in the spotlight of someone else's stage, not at the finish line of someone else's race, but in the quiet, powerful knowing of your own enoughness. You are no longer chasing the version of yourself that others once expected. You are no longer begging life to give you scraps of love, safety, belonging. You have remembered who you are. And in doing so, you've called back every part of yourself that was once scattered, silenced, or forgotten. You are no longer asking, "What do I need to become to be chosen?" You are saying, "I am already chosen, simply by being here, breathing, radiating my truth." And from here, this place of calm knowing, of deep self-honoring, everything begins to change. Not because you force it, but because the world responds differently to someone who no longer doubts their light. You will see it in the way synchronicities unfold, in the people who enter gently and stay with grace, in the doors that open not because you pushed, but because your presence became the key. This is what it means to live from wholeness, to embody the wisdom you once searched for in books and others' eyes, to no longer be the seeker, but the sacred space where seeking ends. And so I leave you with this: you are not too much. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are the fire and the river, the ache and the healing, the question and the answer. You are the miracle you were waiting for. If this journey has touched your heart, if you've seen yourself in these words, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Not for numbers, but for the ripple it creates. You never know who might need this message, who might be standing right now at the edge of their own rebirth, just waiting for a sign that it's okay to begin. Thank you for being here, for choosing yourself, for remembering the sacred light that you are. And as always, Sagittarius, stay soft, stay open, and stay true. The life meant for you isn't coming. It's already here. All it needs is for you to say yes.